Welcome you everybody to this webinar where we're launching our app. And I think you have received the invitation and everything, and we have a great bunch of speakers. And I just wanted to say, so I'm Tanya Paffenholz from InclusivePeace, one of the partners in this, next to UN Women, University of Edinburgh, and also Jackie True's project in Monash University. And I think the exciting thing about this app is that we joined all our data and tried to make very complex things very simple. I just wanted to tell you how this started, because it was not us having an intelligent idea, but it was really Christine Bell who pushed us all and who said, I want this app. And she really had to convince us, because honestly, I was of the opinion that it's just too complex, all these strategies and provisions, you cannot simplify it. And I think we've proven, and Christine with her push has, and UN Women pushing, yes, we need this, have really proven that this is possible. And we're really happy to have the app. And you will see as the speakers go that really our intention is in peace processes, people say, so how do you get these gender and women provisions into agreements? And I think Christine has this perfect data set where you can see all the provisions that are there and you can use language and everything. The interesting thing with our data is we have looked into, but how did people, and who were those people? Were this the women groups? Were this the mediators? Was this the public? Who got these provisions in and how? What strategies they use, which we think is very useful, because if you are in a process, you want to know how you get this in. And then the data of Monash University actually shows, but okay, you have gotten them into the agreement, but has it ever been implemented? So I think this is like a really perfect mix, and it also shows that we can all cooperate for the better. And I'm very happy to now just give briefly the word to Ismail Mustafa from UN Women to guide us through the technicalities before I hand over to Master from UN Women for a welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, hello everyone. I just want to alert you that there is an interpretation feature that will be available after I finish my word. If you'd like to hear the whole conversation in English, please choose the English channel. You will find an icon for interpretation on the down right corner of the screen, where you can click and choose the English language and listen to the whole conversation in English. اهلا بكم كلكم. ازيكم؟ اتمنى ان انتم كلكم تكونوا بخير. احب بس اوضح ان دلوقتي هيبقى في ترجمه فوريه، ودي هتبتدي حالا بعد ما انا اخلص الكلمه بتاعتي. وعلشان خاطر نختار الترجمه العربي، اللي يحب يسمع الترجمه كلها باللغه العربيه يختار بس اللغه الروسيه Russian language، عشان زوم للاسف لحد دلوقتي مش حاطط لنا ايكون للغه العربيه. هتلاقوا زي ايقونه تحت كده مرسوم عليها شكل العالم. بمجرد ما ندوس عليها ونختار اللغه الروسيه هنسمع الترجمه الفوريه باللغه العربيه. لو حد عنده سؤال بس يكتب لنا في الخانه بتاعه الشات، بحيث ان انا اقدر اساعده ازاي يخش مثلا، او لو عنده مشكله ممكن نحلها مع بعض. هبتدي الترجمه حالا. The translation will start right now. Thank you.
Ismail, there's a question in the chat box. If you can just briefly repeat how to access the discussion in English.
The interpretation feature is currently active. If you'd like to hear the whole conversation in English, please select the interpretation icon and select English language from this icon, and then you will hear the whole conversation in English. If you'd like to hear the whole conversation in Arabic, please click on the Russian language, and then you will hear it all in Arabic. Should I repeat it again in Arabic?
I think it's fine. Shukran.
Okay, thank you.
We will hear. Mos, can you give us a welcome?
Thank you very much, and indeed greetings to all across different time zones. I'm speaking from Dubai, so hopefully it's a time zone halfway among the participants. And I trust I can make the opening remarks now. Great, thank you very much. and dear colleagues and friends, dear Mr. Barney Afako, Ms. Miriam, Caroline Ferrer, Ms. Rasha Jarhoum. It is a true pleasure for me to join you on behalf of UN Women. I thank all participants from across the world. We are excited to welcome you to this very timely and important launch of PeaceFem mobile app. It marks yet another peace tech milestone, and it celebrates the results of great collaboration that UN Women has pursued in this field with so many committed, skilled, and talented partners well represented in this virtual meeting. I acknowledge with high appreciation the partners that are present with us today, namely the University of Edinburgh's Political Settlements Research Program, Monash University's Gender, Peace and Security Center, and InclusivePeace. Of course, we are here among partners, among champions of gender equality and women empowerment, including in the women, peace and security arena. So I don't have to elaborate much on what UN Women does. Because I am representing UN Women, I would like to assure you that we continue working across the world to support women's full and equal representation and participation in all issues of peace and security, including in high-level peace processes and negotiations. And from our work, which I'm sure coincides with the experience of many of you in different regions, experience on peace and security, we know that women continue to be largely excluded. I won't even say underrepresented, but largely excluded from negotiating peace. Between 1992 and 2018, between 1992 and 2018, women have constituted only 13% of negotiators and only 3% of mediators, and the mere 4% of signatories in major peace processes globally. And from 1990 to 2018, less than a fifth of peace agreements included provisions addressing women or addressing gender equality. Even where agreements have included specific gender provisions, implementation has proven very difficult. Are particularly worrisome as the link between women's participation and more durable peace processes has been established, and women's inclusion has been recognized, not least through Security Council Resolution 1325 that we are celebrating its anniversary this year. Of course, the participation of civil society groups and women organizations has proven to make a peace agreement about 2/3 most likely to succeed, about 64% less likely to fail. And in the Arab States region, where I'm speaking to you from and where I'm currently the regional director, the situation is similar to the global one in terms of women's underrepresentation in peace process. Of course, the Arab States region has a disproportionate share of conflict and crisis, but in terms of women's participation in peace processes, only 26.8% of peace agreements have shown gender provisions as of last year. Only 2 agreements, Bahrain and Yemen, addressed violence against women. And another only 2 agreements in the case of Syria and Yemen have special provision for women affected by conflict. And UN Women, including my colleagues, such as Rachel Dorweeks and others, are proud that along with partners, we have been advocating and pushing towards this greater inclusion of women's participation in peace processes, as well as inclusion of provisions. In Syria, the Constitutional Committee set up last year has a representation of 28% for women. Women constitute 28% of that Constitutional Committee. And this represents an unprecedented level of women participation in peace/political processes, both for Syria and for the Arab region. But of course, these results remain fragile and will need much effort, much collaboration among us as partners to sustain. And because we know that women's participation in peace efforts is not only a matter of gender equality and universal human rights, it's not only an end in itself, it is also crucial for achieving sustainable peace, sustainable economic recovery, for achieving social cohesion and political legitimacy. So the application that we are launching today looks at strategies that have been employed by women peace builders to impact peace processes. And I'm glad the chair, in your introductory remarks, you have highlighted that. And of course, this would and has resulted in gender provisions and data on the implementation of these provisions. The app will further enhance our collective efforts to increase women's political participation and participation in peace processes by providing best practices, and also by shedding light on what has worked and the challenges faced by women peace builders in their work to influence peace processes across the world. Accessible all over the world using very low bandwidth and available in both Arabic and English, the app is also an important contribution to redefining how we work on peacemaking globally and in the Arab states. Because women in conflict areas have been increasingly turning to technology to build peace and reduce gender inequalities. For example, during the recent protests in the Arab region, women organized on social media and recorded and shared their activity in support of the movement when they were unable to join demonstrations. In Libya, activists from the Libyan Women's Network for Peace Building, which the network is supported by UN Women, they have been connected throughout the outbreak of the current pandemic to strategize together on influencing the peace process, while at the same time developing initiatives to prevent the spread of the pandemic in their communities. And it is extremely important that we follow this path, that we learn from women leaders and the women movements where it is active, and that the app launched today offers another great tool within our repository of innovative solutions. How important these new ways of working can be, we all experienced as the COVID-19 pandemic evolved. And we realized the importance of adapting communication channels like our current Zoom meeting and finding new ways of sharing and accessing information. In order to make peace processes more inclusive, we also need to take down barriers that have restricted access to information. And the current crisis is a major opportunity to change business as usual and to build back better. So that adds to the timeliness of this app. We are delighted to launch with you the app today. I would like to thank once again our partners who provided the data for the different components of the app: PSRP, Monash, GPS, and InclusivePeace. We very much hope you will find the app useful and that it will inform strategies for women's participation in peace processes in the Arab states and beyond. I think I will now have to hand over to Christine Bell, who will provide an overview of the app that I'm sure you are all excited about. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you, Mos. This was a perfect overview. We are happy that this is all recorded because this was a perfect speech giving a background to the entire topic. And I mean, we have heard that now tech is important to connect, but also to get knowledge. But you need to also use it. So Christine Bell, who I think doesn't need a lot of introduction, and Christine from Political Settlement Program, who is the pusher behind this app. We really would like to highlight this. And Christine, so how do we use this app?
So thank you very much. Well, I was going to just share my screen. First, I wanted to just say that collaboration for us has been really important and we've learned so much from it. And I see it as a collaboration between Monash, InclusivePeace and UN Women. And actually, I feel Rachel Dorweeks pushed us all to really collaborate because she kept saying, I think this app could do more. I think it could do more. And for me, that has been part of the pleasure of it. But also, I think it's actually a collaboration with many of the now 173 people on this call, because really what the app tries to do, I think, is provide a massive billboard for the work that you have all been doing on the ground, in difficult places, in places that often feel that they've got very little hope, where you feel your voices are marginalized. And in some senses, I think the app is an advert for that women can be included, that they can use a whole set of strategies to influence peace processes, that can result in clauses in peace agreements that were not there, and that those then begin a struggle for implementation. So these agreements are often about creating roadmaps for change in which women have important agendas for change to articulate. So I'm just going to share my screen and talk a little bit about what the app does. Oh, is that working? Tanya, I can only see you. Give me a thumbs up. Great. So this is what the app icon looks like. And the app is in essence a very simple tool with simple information. It contains 4 key pieces of information. You can see them all in this first box, which is the basic search box. It contains information about peace agreement provisions that have a gender equality aspect. We don't have all peace agreements or all provisions. We have the peace agreements that have some of the strongest gender equality provisions in the world, and we have a set of categories of gender provision. It also has information about the strategies that women used to try to leverage change, whether that was mass protest, being at the table, being in a parallel room, and often several of these at once. It thirdly has information on what were the enabling and constraining factors that shaped the space that women had to operate. So what were the types of factors that either helped women get to the table or provided barriers that they had to overcome? And finally, what happened, those provisions, when they got there? Were they implemented, yes or no? Were they implemented fully or just partially? It's also possible from the app, depending on your bandwidth, to actually download a version of the agreement. We have most of these bilingually. The whole app search mechanism is available in Arabic and English. You can just change language at any time, or you have a choice at the start from this screen. And it's also possible to link to a timeline of all the agreements in that process, and not just the ones that specifically mentioned gender. I'm not going to take you through all the screens because you can explore them, but the two main ways of using the app are, first of all, to search, where you can search for one of these things: region, country, which peace process, what strategies. So if you want to see all the equality strategies, you can pull those up. If you want to see what happened on the African continent, you can pull that up. You can also combine these searches by choosing several, and then you can reset and start again. But you can also browse. So these buttons along the bottom let you just browse the information. So you could browse by country, by provision, by strategy, by constraining factor. When you get to that screen, then you get a choice of, say, all the regions that takes you to the country. Eventually, you can get to a little box that has all the key information about the agreement on it, and this lets you browse the agreements. And there's also surrounding information if you want it. That lets you see the summary of the provisions. So in each case where a provision in a peace agreement is mentioned, there's a full summary of that provision. And you can also navigate around the content on the other areas, which I won't take you right through. But we think that the app is quite intuitive to use. We have tested it with end users in a limited way, but we have found that the best way to really test an app and get feedback is to put it public with a wide set of users. So the app can be downloaded from the normal places you download apps, Google Play Store, Google App. If we have links with the invitation, if you also, we all have the links on all our websites. And if you just go on those stores and search for PeaceFem, capital P-E-A-C-E, capital F-E-M, you should easily get to the app. It's really important to us staying on those app stores that everybody reviews the app. And the easiest way for us to collect feedback on the app is for you to review the app on the open access website. However, if you have recommendations for the app or feedback that you want to give privately, there is a special email for the app, which is just PeaceFem, the name of the app, at ed.ac.uk, and all of that information can be made available to the participants in the seminar afterwards. How do we think the app is helpful? Well, recently there was a celebration of the end of the Second World War in the UK, and a story emerged from the daughters of the man who wrote the declaration that brought the armistice. And his daughter said this man was just a soldier, but he had been actually worked in theatres before he had worked as a soldier. And when he was asked, because he had a good way with words, he was asked to draft the agreement. And the first thing he did was the first thing that I did when I heard of the peace process in Northern Ireland. I went out to see what happens in these peace processes, who produces, what sort of documents do people produce, what way are they written, how do you influence them? And although nobody ever just borrows from one process into another, the idea for me, certainly as a lawyer, of having a precedent, some sort of example of what somebody has done before, gives you what I would say is really a tool for political imagination in your own process. It is only ever the people and the women in the countries experiencing the conflict who will produce the solutions. People from outside, like me or any of the team involved in this, cannot tell you what to ask for or how to achieve it. But what we can do is make comparative information about what other people have done in their process and how they did it available. I think that the app has sort of three uses. One, to just serve as a billboard and a celebration of what women have achieved. And whenever people encounter obstacles and people say this can't be done, you can say, look, here it can be done, have a look. I think secondly, it gives actual examples of clauses that women have fought and struggled for that are achieved, that may be an inspiration in other contexts. And it provides background access based on research around the battles for implementation ahead if you do achieve it. I'm going to stop there and let our practitioners and all the other rich people you have to draw on talk. But just wanted to say it's been a real pleasure for me working on this process, and it seems appropriate that we have this remotely, given that this is a technological thing, even though that remoteness is itself, I know, posing even greater difficulties than many of you already have. So I'd just like to thank my partners in this, UN Women, Monash Peace and Security, Gender Peace and Security Project, InclusivePeace, but also the design team in UN Women, the app team who were in India, and also all of the women that actually contributed the experience and the practice that led really to the content that is on this app. And I hope that encourages the rest of you to keep going with these very difficult struggles you're in. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Christine. Yes, it has been really a pleasure, and we hope it continues. So what you have also heard from Christine is feel really free to say, oh, this doesn't fit for me, can you add this, or even if you find some information that are not correct, this always happens, just let us know and we will fix it. So the other thing is, I think it is really what Christine said, it's about ideas and inspiration. So what we have done, as Christine said, is give it now for open access testing instead of, but we have chosen 3 guinea pigs now, which you will, and I think pretty interesting guinea pigs, to tell us, look, what is this useful for? And we have here Barney Afako, we have Miriam Colonel Farah, and we have Rasha Chahum, all of them really heavyweights, people involved in peace processes. Barney as a mediator, as a mediation support actor, and Miriam, of course, as the first woman who ever signed a peace agreement as a negotiator, and is now also supporting peace processes, and Rasha as an activist that is not only active in Yemen, but also globally for women's rights. So we have chosen them, and they have overwhelmingly said, yes, we do this, but this was a week ago. So we want to know when they have engaged with this, what they now think about it, and if they find it useful or also not. So Barney, I start with you. So what is it what you want to share with us?
Thank you very much indeed. And first of all, just to express appreciation for the invitation and also for the excellent work that's gone into producing this app. My remarks are going to be from the perspective of what I would call a facilitator in peace processes. Now, the first remark I'd like to make is that peace processes do not begin with negotiations. And women understand this very well because they start early on working to prevent conflict, working to try to get the conflict parties to negotiate, to agree a text, and they continue to accompany the process in the implementation and to try to make sure that there isn't a relapse back into conflict. But the sad thing is that in most of our planning on peace processes, we tend to focus on the negotiations. And we start asking the questions about inclusion only when the parties are convened. And we don't give credence, we don't acknowledge that, in fact, well before getting the belligerents, the people with guns, who tend to be overwhelmingly men, around the table, the women were already working on issues of peace. So this app is going to be important to bridge this gap, the gap between what the women peace builders have been doing even before the parties get round the table to when the negotiations actually start. I think the app is going to be important, as has already been said by Christine, as an example of how others have engaged with similar issues. Now, the challenge that facilitators and mediators often face is that the parties really don't want to be around the table. Very often they've been forced to come around the table because they haven't made progress in the battlefield. And they come around the table focused on their own issues, on their own interests, and they consider any new ideas, anybody else's interests, as an external agenda to be resisted. And that's the posture they bring even to issues that relate, fundamental issues that relate to the participation and the substantive equality of women. So for the facilitator, there is also a task of persuasion to engage the parties so that they overcome some of their fears, so that there is pressure brought to bear on them to allow a process that is genuinely inclusive, to allow outcomes of an agreement that will reflect the totality of society and that will improve the prospects of the peace holding. Now, the facilitator often lacks tools to do this because they're often focusing on so many things at the same time, and not all of them are equally experienced in these issues. So an app like this is not only useful for the women who come into these processes or seek to influence them, but also for the facilitators as they engage the parties. It's terribly important for parties to conflict to understand that they're not the first ones to consider and to adopt these practices and outcomes. So when you can demonstrate to them that in different conflicts among parties who may share some of their own characteristics, it may be a leftist party, it may be a conflict around natural resources, that people have nevertheless ensured and reflected on how to be more inclusive, it is more likely that there will be sympathetic as the mediator and the women engage them. So it's very important as a tool of engagement for the parties to the negotiation, who often are suspicious not only about the women peace security agenda, but anything else that they have in themselves brought around the table. But a tool like this is therefore important to inform the parties, but it's also an important tool to mobilize others who might be outside the process to raise the possibilities of what can be achieved in terms of participation, in terms of the outcomes. And one of the features I like about the tool is that it goes into an analysis of why particular outcomes were not present, why either the participation or the content didn't reach the kind of standards that one might expect. And this is helpful for the facilitators because it helps them with their thinking around how to deal with the particular parties that they're having to engage and to secure an agreement from. It helps them anticipate resistance to ideas. It helps them to formulate new ways of approaching the same issue by seeing several examples of how women's issues have been addressed. Then it is possible to amalgamate those. It's possible to choose the ones that might have the best fit to the particular context that is being addressed. And I like the fact that there is a possibility of improving this app. And I think that you will be getting feedback. And I think that one of the advantages, if you like, of this situation of the pandemic is that people have become much more experienced and savvy in using technology and using these kinds of fora. And I think that they will add pressure on all of us to improve our practice, to improve our tools. And I think that this app will only grow and improve and serve the needs of mediation for a very long time to come. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you, Vani, for this very interesting thoughts and reflections and feedbacks. I think what I'm taking is you say it's an engagement and mobilization tool. I find this really interesting. And also that you mentioned the early engagement, because I think the interesting thing, the app will allow you to say how the early engagement very often of women groups actually who have pushed sort of a certain strategy, and then this could be taken over by the mediation teams. But then it allows also to see from the very beginning, what are these factors that have hindered it and supported it, and you can work on them, but also like, oh, but most of this strategy led to non-implementation. So how can you avoid this? Thank you very much. So Miriam, over to you. What is your take on it? You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yeah, I was saying congratulations for coming up with this tool, Christine, Jackie, Tanya. I wish we had this tool when we were negotiating some 10 years ago, when we still had to do research, looking at examples to help us develop our options for the negotiations in our peace process with the More Islamic Liberation Front, come up with a good arrangement for meaningful autonomy for them. So we didn't have to go through the usual method of research. Of course, by that time, you already had some online publications, but you had to do it one by one and not see everything in one place. I also wish I had this earlier when now in my current work with UN, we do a lot of comparative, learning to be able to develop strategies, as Barney said, that will be applicable for very specific contexts. And this could have helped us prepare for a lot of the documents that we prepare, even for the training that we do on gender inclusion strategies. Certainly, this will help. This makes the work a lot easier for a lot of people who are doing these kinds of work in different ways. I have to say, though, that recently I was asked to provide some input for the Secretary General's report on the implementation of 1325. And one of the starting point was that there has been a downward trend in peace provisions related to gender. And I had to check that data just to see exactly. And I went to the PSRP website. And what I found useful there was that you can access it by year. I don't think I see that tool in the current app. It's very hard to see peace agreements unless I didn't see it well, I didn't see it right. But maybe something like a feature that is based on year would be useful, just to be able to see the progress along the different aspects, different provisions, different components from a year-to-year perspective. So in 2019, for example, I found that there are only about 4 countries where you did have gender provisions, and one was a resolution actually for the intra-Afghan talks that was held in Doha, which had references on gender. So for other people doing research on different components, the fact that gender is one of the highlighted provision there means that they cannot ignore it. They might be looking for other provisions, reform of institutions and so on, but certainly the gender component gets up there, and that creates a very good, knocking on the door so that these are really not forgotten. Going from another perspective, this time as a community peace builder in my previous years, when we were trying to build up capacity and network for local communities to be able to report on the non-observance of human rights and international humanitarian law agreement between the government and the Communist Party, we had to develop templates for monitoring. And of course, we were starting at a time when mobile phones were not even there. We had to provide people with tape recorders and cameras and templates that they wrote, they put together, we put together. If we were doing that this time, an app would have been most appropriate. So FemPeace certainly shows the way that you can actually do this. You can make the work easier, the networking easier, the monitoring easier, whether it's a ceasefire monitoring tool that you want to develop, you can actually do this, and just make sure also that you have the gender component there in all of these tools. So I think I'll stop there and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Miriam. Of course, we like the idea that you said it would have already been useful if you could have used it and if you use it. So, and also thank you for sort of already starting with the feedback, and we are really ready to take the feedback in. And Rasha, from an activist point of view, do you think that's useful?
Hi, Tanya, thank you so much. First of all, I want to congratulate you for this really amazing app. For us, it is definitely helpful. First of all, we have already relied on a lot of information that were available by each one of yours organizations. So having all of these resources in one app, pulling all these resources together is very helpful for us, especially now that we are at a stage where we are trying to advise and provide recommendation on how to mainstream gender into the peace agreement. So I think this was timely for us, and I'm happy that it's coming out. So from a quick look at it, I did notice that not all of the countries are reflected. Maybe you're going to be adding more countries, at least to our region. And this is very important for us because we need example from our own region. Sometimes we need to, for example, reflections from Syria, Libya, or South Sudan. I think Sudan was there, I think, or Iraq and Yemen only. I'm not so sure anymore. Sorry about my memory. So this is in general my very quick review about the app. I wanted to add a little bit just to give you some background about some of the challenges we face in terms of, mobilizing technology. So I want to talk about two things. First of all, how as Yemeni women peace builders came together to support the peace process and how we mobilized and used technology for this. And then the challenges in terms of inclusion of women in the Yemen context, so that it might be helpful to have that in the back of the head for this app. So very quickly, as Yemeni women, technology was the main resource for us to mobilize to support the peace process, basically because we were not funded and we did not get any technical as well support. So in the beginning, it was for us to mobilize and coming together through WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, and as Peace Track Initiative, we existed in the digital space in the beginning more than in the physical space as a nonprofit organization working to localize and feminize the peace process. So the first thing was to revive a women's coalition and unite the women's movement. And we did that under the Women's Solidarity Network, where we have now 270 women connected together, still through digital means. We have not yet had an opportunity to meet all of us face to face. So we've been already using the digital space, I would say, to support the peace process. And through the Women's Solidarity Network, we were able to brief the UN Security Council twice. And just to highlight that when I briefed the council, I also did it remotely from Canada because there was a ban in the US. And so this is how technology plays to create some spaces to include women in very important spaces. The second thing is that as we were working on as well, for example, influencing the peace agreements that are going on. As the Women's Solidarity Network and our work in the Peace Track Initiative, we were able to influence specifically the Riyadh Agreement. At least 10 recommendations were resonated with our, or 10 articles were resonated with our recommendations. I didn't see the Riyadh Agreement still in the app. I think it would be worth adding that, or maybe I just didn't use the correct search. But I think reflections from Riyadh and Stockholm in the app, that would be also important for us for Yemen context. There were a few things that I think that needs to pay attention is that as peacemakers, when we work with the international community and we talk about women's inclusion, especially when we are Yemeni women, there is this kind of negative gender norms about us. So it takes us more time to convince international actors, diplomats, to support women's inclusion, because they're very stuck with the narrative that Yemeni women, it's a conservative culture, it's patriarchal, and then it's not easy for them to understand the importance of having women at the table. And you know, in Yemen, we had a very clear and a great example during the national dialogue when women secured almost 30% of participation. And they, having an app like this, reminding these international organizations or international diplomats and international mediators that we have done this before. Yemeni women have already challenged the lack of agency. Yemeni women have already went out to the streets and were part of the national dialogue. This is very important because I didn't feel that there is building up on whatever have been achieved. Instead, we're always going back to square one in terms of women's inclusion. And this has been one of the things that were very challenging for us to change. We have been able to, like we decided we're not gonna wait for an invitation anymore to access the peace space. And we have decided to just send our own delegations whenever there is peace consultation. So now we are doing this. We're not waiting for this kind of invitation. But now with everything moving to digital space, it's becoming more challenging for us now to access the official digital space, because we can't really set up a side meeting to the digital space. We need to be invited for that space. And we have kind of forced ourselves to be in this space, pushing for this. But we've already heard some pushback about our inclusiveness. Sometimes it's too much bandwidth. This was one of the reasons that were told to me by the UN when we wanted to attend one of the meetings. So it's there is new innovative ways. They are resorting to new innovative ways, but the exclusion somehow continues. They have started testing live, let's say, polling or surveying tools. And I participated in that, many women participated in that, but they also, it was very quick and not like there were closed-ended questions, open-ended questions, not enough time to answer the questions. There was a timer. If you need to think about a question with political connotation, you will lose the opportunity to really answer because it was quick. So are we, like, this is great that there is exploration for new tools to be used in the peace process, but we need to be careful not to be quick to celebrate them. I've noticed that already they are talked about, oh, we have included 500 people. No, but they really were not, it was not meaningful inclusion. We have to be careful now in the digital space, that this digital space have to be ensure that it is meaningful participation. And I would stop here and I'm happy to answer more questions later.
Thank you, Rasha. Sharing your perspective also, like how the digital world on the one hand connects, but on the other hand has also an exclusionary sort of risk. And I think we see this a lot with COVID, that there where we have established contacts, it's very easy to connect. But there where you don't, it becomes like an exclusionary game because you connect with those you already know. And I think that's particularly true with that. Of course, an app also, I think, cannot solve everything. As we said, it can inspire you. And I think what you also said, I like, it's like a reminder of what can be achieved. And I think the Yemeni case in particular is, I mean, the national dialogue is always the example we are quoting everywhere to say, this is the way to go. Having multiple quota systems, having it in the delegations, but having also separate delegations of women, of youth, and also sort of the Southerners in this case, who were sort of the group that was more disadvantaged. So this is always a perfect example. And then your own country doesn't move on that same way. So I think that also shows that in peace processes, I called it in another event last week, we know that peace processes are not linear, but there are like constant negotiations or renegotiations of the social and political contract. So the problem, I think, in our like mediation peace community is that we think like, okay, here's this peace agreement, this is our unique chance. And I think the app also shows you how many different agreements were there in a country. And I think this shows also like, okay, this is not the only one. In Yemen, you had the Gulf Cooperation Agreement, you had the National Dialogue, you had other agreements, and you will have other ones probably too. So it's also like sometimes you gain, sometimes you lose, but you are on a continued track. So I think the app can just help, like, also not to lose hope, but to see like, it was a chance, it's a moment, let's use it. And these are good examples on how to do it. But sometimes the constraining factors are so big that you can see, okay, we have to overcome these first before we can even use the strategies that are there. I would like to switch now and invite to sort of asking questions. We have so many participants that we suggested to please pose your questions, comments on the chat function, and we take them on. What we have already received is quite a lot of questions, comments with regards to can we add more cases? Is there more cases also from the region? And how do we update the app? And very honestly, we have been so busy doing it that we only started like last week, really thinking, so how do we continue? And I think, yes, as Christine also said, we have more provisions are there, but not all provisions are strong on gender. So we have to also decide, do we put provisions in that are zero or that are low, just to show it. And the other thing is, we definitely have not exhausted all agreements. We have not exhausted, but the point is, this is not a quantitative tick boxing thing where you quickly look, but it's really like based on a lot of sort of primary research to find all those strategies. And I think we need to be also clever at using tech probably. How do we continue in making this a little bit of a less intensive work as it was before? Because this was years of research that went into this app. So how can we make this more light? Let you all participate in getting our research and still have the quality control there. I think these are the discussions we're gonna have. In terms of how it's updated, in terms of existing data, I think that we will just take by the comments also we get, and we will constantly do data cleaning and but updating in terms of new information. I think we hear the message very clearly. Let us go back and think how we best do this in the easiest and lightest way. The other questions we have received, and I would like to give the first one to Christine, is about like, are the security provisions also taken care of, but also how is the user security for the app? Christine, can you say something about that?
Yes, so I've tried to answer as many of the questions that I saw online as I could. So I'll just, on the user security, so the app gives information, it doesn't gather information. The only information it would gather is if you voluntarily log a review or voluntarily email us. If you email us, that's secure within the university systems, as secure as our systems are. Like any system, I guess people can hack email systems, but the University of Edinburgh, like most of the UK universities, is quite high security in this. The app asks for one permission. I asked for permission to access photos. This is a little bit misleading. It doesn't access photos. You have to give a permission to download the PDF of the agreement. If you don't want to give that, it explains that while it says photos, you only need to give the permission to do it. This was a technical problem, that this was the best solution we could find. If you don't want to give that permission, don't give it, just say no. It means you won't be able to download the PDF, but in fact, the app does not access anything of yours at all. You do download the app through Google Play Store and through Apple iStore. Whatever information they gather, the way they gather for any app, there's no special information they gather for this app, then that is sort of down to them. If you really are a person that says, I can never get an app from Google Play Store or Apple, I would suggest you contact us through PeaceFem, because we would be able to send, I think we need to check this, but we would be able to send a direct link. But most people in most of the contexts do use the Apple and Google iStores. My understanding is they don't take very much information, but obviously we don't have control over them. But the app itself is an information app and not an information gathering app. So it shouldn't be, it won't, I mean, I can categorically tell you, it won't tell us anything about your location or who's downloading it, unless you contact us directly and tell us that yourself. We won't know that. And it's free to access, and it's should be available in all countries in the world. But again, if you are finding that somebody doesn't have access, that would be a really good thing to email us about, because obviously we have checked in as many countries as we had quick and easy contact to, but not every country. I just add one last thing. The app does not include all agreements everywhere in all process. We do have that and lots of search mechanisms on PSRP website, and you can link to that from the app. What we included was really the sort of 30 or so agreements that had the most extensive specific gender provision, which is not to say that women only try to influence references to women or to things directly concerning women. Of course, women want to influence everything. So the app has this one task it does, which is to make the gender specific clauses and the strategies around them. And this partly explains that we will try and keep it updated, and we will be looking and taking on board the ideas for development. But in some senses, these agreements out of the work we've done are some of the agreements that have the most extensive and detailed gender provision. They're not necessarily, I hesitate to use the word the best agreements because they have lots of different issues. But in that sense, it provides the tool the way it is. And it also slightly explains why some processes are underrepresented, because if they didn't have specific provisions around women and girls and gender inclusion, then they aren't included, but you can get that on the surrounding websites. I think what's nice about the examples and even the critiques of the app is that already I can see it's like sort of drawing people into the wider background data. And the really good thing about the processes we have is because they draw on the wider data of all three of our projects. That wider data is there, but you'll have to go back into the data sources for it. So there's the limitation of the app is in ways also the tool to its simplicity, that it gives you something to jump off from, and then I think the wider research is there for further deeper questions you may have.
Thank you, Christine. We have a number of questions asking if that app is free. Yes, apparently, because some of you downloaded it, and I think it's free because we had support by various donors who really wanted that out, and through UN Women, the German Development Cooperation Ministry supported the development of the app. But of course, behind all the data that came into this was funding from Australia, from DFID, from Norway, Switzerland, Sweden, from our data side all over the years. And so I think that there's a lot of sort of support that went into getting the data, but also then producing the app. And of course, if we continue, we probably need more, but I think I find it also intriguing to think about how we could co-create this more and use all of your expertise and be more innovative on data gathering in the research we do to make this really live, and also have an exchange space where we can see what your needs are. We hear here also a question of like, is there an offline use of the app for people who cannot have smartphones? We know there is a huge coverage of smartphones, and actually we tested it widely in different countries with also very poor smartphones or non. So if you don't have a smartphone, it's difficult. So is there an online version? I have to go back to Christine. She's our tech freak in this.
So I actually have to check myself whether it's off or online. You can't at the minute use it directly from a website, but actually I think that's something that we could set up quite quickly. The wider information is sort of really easily accessible on the website, but that particular combination's not. I think that might be a relatively easy thing for us to do. So that's a really good piece of feedback.
Yeah, so thanks already for that feedback. There's another question about how can governments promote and support sort of the PeaceFem app? amongst the target audience. I think one thing that comes to my mind is certainly to share it, to send emails and Twitters and whatever to your partners and actively invite them. This is one thing. Also, probably share your and tell us who you want to have it, and we can also share it. That's what we can offer. But I think this is one thing. But then the other thing is maybe also sitting together with us and thinking, like, really, like, having maybe I'm just making it up now, having maybe a representative panel of people who say this could be useful, that could be useful, these are our partners and these are their needs, so that we can constantly kind of work on it together. I think that could be something. But I would like to, I mean, Barney, let me ask you, because you're working with a lot of sort of governments and mediators. Any idea where you think this could be shared so that reaches sort of different target audiences?
I think one of the app's most important uses is in preparation, whether it is at the prevention stage, whether it's a pre-negotiation stage, or during the talks. The more people there are that are exposed to these issues, to analysis on women's participation and outcomes issues, the better it is around the table. Because people around the table are always looking outside the table for affirmation. So if the content that is derived from this app is out there, it will tend to equalize the relationship. So the same app that the government has, the same app that the activists will have, that people who are the parties around the table will both be sharing from the same source material. And that leads to a second point, is that there's still going to need to be needed somebody who can interpret it, who can direct people to what they think is most pertinent for that particular conflict, and perhaps the suggestion of what the outcomes might look like. I think for that reason, because it travels widely, it's a matter of really putting it up there. It's a matter of referencing it and encouraging people to download it. And it can also be used to back up arguments that each side is making. So it will not only produce one outcome. People might find one process where perhaps the language or the content is much more to their liking. But even that will improve the quality of the discussion immensely. So dissemination, I think, is what governments and indeed all others can do.
Miriam, anything to add on dissemination ways?
Well, I think there will be a series of launches, right? And each time you will have new features coming up, and so you see that kind of a snowball in the awareness of people of this app. But just to build on a little bit more on what Barney said, I can imagine a situation where during negotiations, the parties will open the app and take a look at what's been done in some places, etc., just to help them process their own thinking. Because peace agreement, coming up with a peace agreement is actually writing a text. And you actually, unless it's written by somebody else for you, in some cases that has been the case, the third party writes the text. But in processes where they are jointly writing the text, there is that constant engagement and referencing that where the app can actually be at that moment can be looked at, projected on the screen, which is how we did our negotiation. Everything was projected on the screen. And if we had references, we showed it to. And the good thing about this is the fact that since it already exists, since all of these gender provisions are found in all of these texts, it sort of legitimizes it. It lends gender provisions more legitimacy in the eyes of, the skeptics, whether in fact it's even people who are not, fully convinced that it is even important. And I think that's the fact that is highlighted in an app on its own, then certainly the legitimacy is boosted. The legitimacy of having gender provisions across the different thematic aspects of a peace agreement gets that kind of boost or credence. I was just wondering if it would have helped to call the app, you know, like something like Find PeaceFem, sort of more proactive than just PeaceFem, because PeaceFem can be so many other things, right? But if it's something that you want them to find and where they can see actually what they might need or might be useful to them, then maybe an active word like find could help the name of the app. That's secondary. What's inside the app is the more important thing.
Thank you. We should have asked you before we choose that name. But maybe, let's see. I think we take all the feedback. I think what comes to my mind when listening to all of you is really the interesting thing that we are often called in peace processes, like, so how do we do inclusion? How do we do this? And often the question is very much focused on the table and the women in the delegations, instead of looking into like, what are we doing this for? This is not about negotiations and an agreement. This is about creating pathways to inclusive societies that are holistic and that really sort of can be robust in integrating sort of gender and inclusion right large. And interestingly, with the hype, I would say, on focus on women and gender inclusion, other inclusion topics have almost been like lower, but we know that if women are included, the rest is usually also included. So it's like giving a leeway to a more inclusive society. So that means it also helps to see the focus is not just about that table and that agreement, but it's really about what are those strategies and what are these implementations that leads us, and how can the provisions, because the focus on provision, what I find very often useful here is that when people say, so how do we get this woman, how do we pressure the parties to get the women in? And sometimes to get more or less women is maybe not even the solution, but if you have more provisions and they're going to be implemented, you're contributing sometimes so much more to an inclusive society than doing all this pressuring. But to say, okay, but realistically, it's often the woman putting the pressure in order to get that in. But also to be clear, it's at the end of the day, the provisions and not only the participation. It's this combination, I think, and that shows you in terms of the strategies, how to really contribute to an inclusive society and not only to an inclusive process. And I think the app, we hope it does both, but we also get already like requests in the chat box of like, could we provide a library of research that gives background research? I think we can talk about that because we have it all. How could that be also accessible in one place? I think that's the demand. And also like, could there be civil society kind of reporting system? I've not really understood what is meant by that, but maybe Russia will have an idea what is meant by that.
Hi, Tanya, thank you. Well, we shared the app with our network, the Women's Solidarity Network, and our regional network as well, MENA 1325. I think everyone at this stage is excited about the app. I think it has unlimited potential. You can definitely build on it and expand it and have more countries, more thematic areas. I would be interested, for example, to see like the peace agreements. How did they address child recruitment issues? How did they address sexual violence? How did they, based on thematic areas that we have been struggling to try to push in our peace process. So generally, I think there is so much potential for the app and it's going to be helpful. But for us, I think as activists and as women peace builders, we know how to leverage this and how to use it, and it's going to support us. But more importantly, I need from you, the organizers, to actually make it available for DPPA, UN missions in our countries, diplomats working in the field of the peace process, peacekeeping missions, because I feel there is, as I said, no building up on what has been happening and no learning. And this, if you can set up like specific events with targeting these groups of people, for me, this is where I found the blockage is in terms of inclusion of women. It's not the national actors. We have so many tools in Yemen supporting women's participation. As I said, we had the experience of the NDC. Currently, the government have launched the National Action Plan with specific objective to include women in the negotiations. The other armed groups have many times verbalized that they don't have a problem in including women, including in their visions. So the main problem to me is the structure and design that is set by the UN. And as we saw in the Riyadh agreement as well, we saw the difference between what happened in Stockholm and what happened in Riyadh. In Stockholm, the women were not even allowed in the opening and closing ceremony. But in Riyadh, we saw a delegation of at least 16 women who were present in the signing ceremony. So generally, what I would say that we need to make this available for the diplomats who are supporting the peace process in our countries, for those who are working UN staff, and just ensure that this is available and that they comprehend what it means.
Thank you very much. So I see already women activists running around with the phone and telling the UN, like, I mean, how technically outdated are you? Are you not using the app? So I think, so we see this, maybe also I think what Barney said in the beginning, that this is an engagement tool, also to say, okay, here's an app that's useful for you. But this is also an invitation for a dialogue, an invitation of what are we talking about here? We're talking about women inclusion, about gender provisions, about making this sustainable, about pathways to society. So I think that we should not forget this function, that it's not just a technical tech, but it's also a meaningful tech that invites for exactly all these points what you describe as struggling with. And I think we hear it all the time, like it's the walking the talk of gender and women inclusion is really the thing, what is missing. And what comes to my mind here is what I see very often in peace processes, because you, Russia, said, oh, if the UN would only change. And of course the UN itself is also very limited often and constrained by the circumstances and the polarization that goes on in regions, in the Security Council. So it's a tough job, I think, for everybody. But I think what everybody also sees these days is this linear idea of peace processes is not working, but we are still trying to kind of do it because that's what we are used to do. So I think how can we all overcome this and make this like creating provisions for the future of the country, the norm, the normal thing, and not even like saying, oh, this is too complicated now, this, it's just normal. But I think we need to all pull different strings to help the systems basically accept what the system has in the policy documents already long time, I think, agreed. Let's look into sort of other ideas and other questions in terms of what is it, what we can do. We get a lot of affirmations and congratulations. Thank you very much for this. Let me check what is it, if you have another, because we have a couple of, we have like a bit more than 10 minutes left. So if you have other comments and questions, please bring them in now. So we have like people saying like, are the most critical secure gender specific provision is what is women's rights? How do we get this all in? I get this question, is there a function or will to be considered for future rollout? Search function, agreement by language. I think by agreement we have already. By language of peace agreement, I think they're all translated. By year, I think Miriam already highlighted to that. And I think adding more stuff also in terms of background and stuff. We hear your message that you say on the one hand, what you want us to do is be that the space where you can at least get the link, where you get the information accumulated. And the other thing, what I think I just also saw in the chat function that, and I'm very excited about it, that Christine also thinks we should like think about a co-creation with you. So how do we get your expertise and knowledge? It took us so many, I mean, you cannot imagine how sometimes how much time we needed to find out how would this provision come into this agreement? Who mentioned it first? Who pushed it? Who said it? You have to do so many interviews, so many questions. So my dream was always like, can we not just ask this question to you? And of course, we will not get homogenized answers. Some people would say, no, I did it, or no, we did this. And we have to harmonize this and control the data. But I think that's a very interesting suggestion that comes to by you. There's another question of, can we search by theme? Christine, do you want to add to this?
Yes. So you can search by theme in that all the agreements included have been categorized as to what type of provision they have. And of course, many have several types. So do they have a provision on equality, on sexual violence, on women's equal participation? We haven't actually included child soldiers, but I think that is something that we could add. That we have that information on the background data where you can do much detailed searches. So it can be searched by theme, and then you could match that with a country, which quickly lets you see, did this country deal with this theme? You can also search by then the other categories, so type of activism that women used, to see what are the countries where this type of activism played a role. And you can search around this enabling and constraining factors, because of course women don't get to choose the environment in which they operate. So there's an attempt, I think, show a mix of those and let you combine them in different ways through that front search page. Or if you just want to explore by theme, you can use the buttons at the bottom to explore by theme. But sorry, I should just say, but it's harder to explain like this than it is to fiddle with. So I'd encourage you to just download it and play with it, and then see, this didn't make sense to me or whatever. This is really why we're making it public.
We're getting two challenging questions from Tanisha. The one is, I think, which is on, how does this roll out after implementation of a peace agreement? Do we have data on parliamentary quotas, on actually the sort of future institutions that are built? And I think that's really the interesting question, because at the end of the day, you want to know, how is this permitted the building of society and the building of the institutions? Are they really inclusive? Or was this just like a tick in the peace agreement and then afterwards it died down? And sometimes the implementation of the peace agreement tells you half of the story, but then there's other processes in a country, like constitutional reforms, that sometimes are part of the agreement, sometimes not. So I think thinking about along the way, I think is another story we can think of, and would of course push the app more into this pathway to inclusive society direction than only spot on the very agreement. So I think that's something we can discuss. The other question you are asking us, so you want to profit from the rich experience on the panel, like saying like, so what is the priorities for women advocates to push for if you want to get gender provisions into the agreement?
I think maybe Tanya's screen has frozen, and she said if this happens, she'll be back online very quickly, but maybe I could finish her question and go to the panelists. So somebody asked, and I think it is interesting, you know, if you had one thing that you should try to get in a peace agreement for women, what would it be? Can we even say that? What do you think, Rasha?
Thank you, Christina. This is something that we are struggling right now. We're trying to develop specific recommendations that are resonating with, and there are two things. There's mainstreaming like articles that are talking about the participation, and then mainstreaming articles that address the priority issues that the women are talking about. So when I said child recruitment, this has been an issue that was raised by women many times. Releasing the detainees, women and men, this has been a priority issue for women. So we've been trying to push their priority issues to be in the peace process, and also in terms of participation. And I had an exercise where members of the negotiation delegations in an informal space, we were discussing this, and there was some pushback from them in terms of they always see a ceasefire agreement as something military security and there is no room for women. But it took some time for them to start to understand that this is important and it's about the issues and then women's participation and coming from the national dialogue outcomes. I hope at the end when we will have the agreement, this will be reflected, but it's a process that we are pushing for and working together with the men who are basically in the negotiations process.
Thank you, Rasha. And you understood I froze because I'm sitting in Kenya and some sort of tree fell over our internet cable and I had to switch over to mobile data. So this is the normal way of basically being attuned to tech, as you know. So Miriam, what is your point?
Of course, if you're doing the pushing, whether from inside the room or outside the room, you try to get in as much as you can. And then knowing that you might not be able to get everything. Some issues might be very important in specific contexts. For instance, in our context in the Philippines, even in Mindanao, economic participation, the role of women in the economic sector is not a problem. In fact, we see a lot of women, even in the overseas workers coming in, has been feminized as well. But what was really missing was the political participation of women, and so there was some specific emphasis on that in the text of the agreement. Precisely because it was one big area that had to be developed, while other areas were relatively developed. But these are really cross-cutting issues that we try to your best to squeeze in the different elements. But what we found in our experience is that this is a cumulative process. You won't get everything in one step, which is, for instance, getting the peace agreement. There are next steps that will need to be done, and every step of the way, in our case, a law had to be legislated. And the good thing about this is that the women never let up, so that in coming up with the law, they were even able to insert more provisions, working with women legislators who are very supportive of bringing in these added provisions in the law, on top of what we found in the agreement. So then now the bigger challenge of seeing it on the ground, and it will take some time. There are still problems, certainly. But yeah, this is a process, it's cumulative. You sort of build on what you achieve and try to get in more and more, so that there's that kind of cumulative successes that will overall create a big impact. But it takes time and it takes a lot of effort.
Yeah. Thank you, Miriam. I think the experience of the strategies you can surge and the provision is really, it's the combination of it all. And then you have to see what fits best in your context. But certainly the combination of mobilization, putting pressure on parties, on mediators, on everybody, using the international networks, the regional, the local, in combination with, as Miriam just said, providing the right expertise at the same time. So having this network of the ones doing pressure, the others providing expertise and thinking ahead. And I would like to hand over now, because we are reaching the end, and really thank you very much for all your interesting comments and also all the really nice congratulations. We are really very happy about this, and we'll really continue and got a lot of energy from you to continue on this. I would like to hand over to Jackie True, our partner here from Monash University, to give us some closing words. Jackie, over to you.
Thanks so much, Tanya, and thanks to everyone and especially our panelists, Barney, Miriam, and Rasha, for their great comments and participation. I'm going to say tonight because it's almost midnight for me, so please bear with me while I just make some closing remarks before I retire for the evening. So I think it's just a wonderful opportunity to all come together across the globe to launch the PeaceFem app. And the PeaceFem app is a really great opportunity to celebrate the successes of women's participation in peace processes and to recognize why that participation matters. And I think, as Christine has said numerous times tonight, it shows what has been achieved, what can be achieved, and what still needs to be achieved. Because as Moaz opened our launch, he noted that even where gender provisions and very strong provisions are adopted in some peace agreements, the implementation of those provisions is still very weak. But at the same time, as Russia says, it means we can build on what has been achieved and we don't have to go back to step one. And as Miriam said, you know, we also don't have to go, if you're a you know, an activist, you're a mediator, you're a UN diplomat, you don't have to go yourself back and research other agreements from scratch. So I think the app has great potential to further support women's participation in peace processes and giving those who have least access more know-how and more shared learning on how to progress peace processes. But I also think, and this is the part that Monash Gender, Peace and Security Centre really contributed to in the data that we've been able to develop and collect based on field research, but also statistical research supported by our Government Research Council and our Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And what we've been able to do is actually look at the you know, the extent of implementation of gender provisions in ongoing peace processes and in post-conflict situations. And I think this is really important as peace dialogues move forward, current ones, and as peace processes that have been so-called concluded, even the very impressive peace agreements such as the 2016 Colombia Agreement, which we might see as the high watermark for inclusive peace, we can see actually quite weak implementation, even in that agreement with regard to the almost 100 gender provisions. So I think the app has real potential for us to be able to monitor and hold governments accountable and parties accountable for implementing those provisions. It enables us to also build further awareness of those provisions so that we can seek greater implementation of gender equality in post-conflict societies. It also will allow us to continue to push states and donor states in particular to support the resourcing and financing of the implementation of these provisions and of women's ongoing efforts to secure inclusive peace. So I've thanked my own government and supporters for this research, and I know others have thanked them, but I think, you know, it's terrific to have this collaboration between governments, the United Nations, UN Women, and researchers and universities to actually support more inclusive peace and in particular women's participation in peace negotiations that have been largely dominated by men. So the app is clearly not perfect. It couldn't be, but I think it is perfect for mediators, diplomats, UN officials and women activists all to use. And I greatly look forward, and I think we all do, to everyone's input and everyone's feedback on the App Store, as well as to the email that Christine provided, the PeaceFem email. And we fully expect, and we really greatly look forward to seeing how, in particular, women's rights activists develop innovative uses of this app that we can learn from. And we really look forward to everyone pushing us further to provide better and more relevant expertise and information. And finally, it's been a real pleasure to collaborate with the Political Settlements Program at the University of Edinburgh with InclusivePeace to support UN Women in its endeavour to bring us all together with the PeaceFem app. A couple of years ago, UN Women hosted an expert group meeting in New York with a range of different researchers from around the world, all working on peace agreements, peace processes, gender provisions and women's participation. And I think this is really the first initiative, the first endeavour which shows it is possible to collaborate, even though we all use different methodologies, we often research different countries, different processes, but there is something to be gained in pulling together and you know, really synthesizing all of these efforts for the cause, which is really to see, you know, not only more inclusive peace, but more peace, quite frankly, since we know, you know, so many peace processes fail and, you know, fail, you know, quite quickly. So thanks to everyone, and you've all stayed, almost everyone has stayed for an hour and a half, so that's fantastic. And over to you now, Tanya.
Tanya, if I may just have a brief word. This is Muaz here, and I could not raise my hand virtually. I don't know how to do it on the phone. May I?
Just go ahead. You started us, and please end the meeting formally. Over to you, and then you don't have to hand back to me. Thank you, really, all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much, Tanya. And indeed, it has been a very rich discussion. I am both proud and humbled to be among such experts, both from the activism practitioner side, such as Russia, from the academic, research, substantive side, such as Christine and Jackie, and you, Tanya, and other colleagues. And this is all a joint effort. And here I have to acknowledge the visionary support from the government of Germany, UN Women's engagement and the support to this app would not have been possible without the funding and support from Germany, from BMZ and GIZ. And it is in fact part of a long-term partnership to advance women's participation in peace processes that Germany and UN Women and other partners have had. I think I truly congratulate the contributors to this app, and also the vision that have been demonstrated in this app and in this discussion. As a representative of the UN system, I have heard you loud and clear. There is a good, our work is cut out for us in terms of ensuring that the UN's missions in crisis and conflict areas apply and use that app. But I'm extremely optimistic about the future, thanks to your continuing involvement, to your contribution to date, to capitalizing and leveraging on technology like this app would provide. So thank you again so much, and we look forward to our continuing partnership with you and with the government of Germany and other key partners. Thank you. So Tanya, you can adjourn the meeting. You were the moderator.
I just say goodbye to everybody, and thanks for the good discussions and for all your questions. And in particular, I think not only for the encouragement, but for pushing us what else we can do. Because honestly, we were like a little bit like, let's do this app and then we're done. We're not done. We have clearly understood that. We are just at the starting point, and we would like to find mechanisms to really all invite you to share information and participate, so this becomes all our app and really useful for the future. Thank you so much. And yes, share and disseminate and feedback, and let us become better. Thank you very much. Bye to everybody.
Goodbye. Thanks.